That you're talking about, Ashley, allow me, is what brings us into the next topic, which is about the economy, and Joel Chacha is going to lead that session.
Well, the government of the day boasts of a 2.8% inflation rate, which is a 17-year low. But the question here is on the shrinking disposable income. That is through what many may consider overtaxation. And the purchasing power, hence, is low. How are you working to ensure that there is money in the pockets of Kenyans?
Thank you. When President Ruto took over leadership of this country in 2022, the 5 or 6 macroeconomic indicators were not looking good. And I need to clarify now that I have this opportunity. Many people think when we project that time frame so that to show the distance we have covered, we are casting aspersions at the previous administration. That is not true. Kenya got to where it was in 2022 because of factors mainly beyond the control of President Uhuru Kenyatta, because the country's economy was shut down for nearly 2 years by COVID-19. No economic activity. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine, which affected the global supply chain of wheat and other oil and foodstuffs, and many other factors. So when we refer to 2022, it is not political. It's just a fact. And in any case, that's the only way we can explain what we have done. Now, straight to your issue. The macroeconomic indicators were bad. The dollar was rising on a daily basis, 160. At one point, it approached 170. The price of fuel, the same. At one point, it approached 217 per liter for petrol, super. Then inflation was 9.6%. And then if you take the 6 basic food items, starting with unga, the main ones, again, the prices were much higher than they are today. Today, essential commodities, 2 years later, are down significantly. Just to give unga as an example, from 240, 250, 230, depending on the brand, to now something between 95 and 120, depending on the brand, maybe 120 something. Number 2, the foreign exchange stability has been realized for more than a year now, from the high of 160 plus to now 127, 129 for some time. The same applies to the price of fuel, which is decreasing every day, every month, including last month when it went down by 4 shillings. Inflation again from 9.6 to 2.8%, the lowest in 17 months. Now, in 17 years. Now, that has not happened by magic or by chance. It has happened because of policy interventions, subsidizing production as opposed to consumption, the fertilizer subsidy, and so many other interventions in various sectors that has manage the macroeconomic situation. It has taken 2 years. But flashback to 2002 when President Kibaki took over, when we had similar situations at the exit of President Moi. It took President Kibaki 6 years to bring back macroeconomic stability. President Ruto has taken 2 years. By the grace of God, so the 2 years look a bit long, but in the context of what has happened in the past, I think this is a bit of a very good trial. What remains now is what you're asking me. The macroeconomic stability, for it to be felt by citizens, must be followed by microeconomic stability, which is improving household incomes, creating jobs, and so many other things that we are doing in the space of SMEs, in the space of the various sectors, including manufacturing and tourism. So, to answer your question, the two, the macroeconomic transformation and the microeconomic transformation cannot be taken simultaneously. One must precede the other. Going forward, therefore, the remaining 3 years is the interventions. We're going to have interventions that will respond to the issues you said. Already those interventions have been operationalized. They are on course, creating jobs through the 3 major prongs: creating jobs at home, creating jobs online, creating jobs even overseas, and then also other interventions that will enable disposable incomes in the pockets of individual citizens.
But
going
how
forward,
that really
it can only
be achieved when the whole problem begins with our budgeting? For instance, despite the challenges faced in the fiscal year 2024-2025, your projections in the next fiscal year for 2025-2026, you're looking at having a budget of 4.25 trillion Kenya shillings, with the revenue, ordinary revenue, actually crossing the 3 trillion mark. That basically will translate either to more debt, because already we will record a 759 billion fiscal deficit, but at the same time, we are forced to actually impose now the taxation on Kenyans, because last year we only got 2.1 trillion in terms of ordinary revenue. So why this shift over ambition on ordinary revenue collections?
Again, in 2022, the fiscal deficit was more than 8.2% or thereabout. And that means the gap between revenue and expenditure. It was at 8.2%. This administration, in 2 successive budgets, has reduced it. Currently, it's at 4.3.
On paper, because of revenue shortfalls. That shifts towards the end of the fiscal year.
Yes.
And you are forced to bring a supplementary budget.
We are forced, but in all fairness, where the fiscal deficit is now is not where it was in 2022. And in fact, I am confident the Treasury will bring it further down this year. But more fundamentally, it is not in our priority of things to generate more revenue through perhaps more taxation, to answer you directly. What we are doing is that we are reviewing tax policy, because that's where you can still get more revenue, not by imposing new taxes or higher taxes, but by adjusting certain tax policy instruments that gives you more revenue. You heard the Minister for Finance and the National Treasury the other day explaining how the Treasury is entertaining a possibility. Of course, it has to go through public participation, of even relooking at VAT, what the VAT should be like, maybe try to bring it down, and other taxes, as one of the 5 pillars this administration is putting in place to ensure that tax is a bit more accommodating, more people are bearing the burden of tax without necessarily compromising revenue. Number 2, Kenya's debt right now is in a better place than it was in 2022.
11.3 trillion is better?
It is better in the sense that, debt is calculated in 2 ways. First, as an absolute figure, which is what you're citing, but also as a percentage to GDP. And in other words, many countries...
At what percentage is it? Already at distress, 68%.
You call it distress, it's not. If it was, the IMF would have said so, and I'm sure the IMF has not said so.
Yeah, Your Excellency.
They are just warned us that we need to make sure that it doesn't enter into the red zone.
But 55% plus or minus 5 is what is allowed by our law.
The point is, it's not even about percentage also alone. Many countries, including developed countries are highly indebted. The US, for example, the US debt is about almost 120% of GDP. Japan is 250% of GDP. 248, 250. So and many other countries. Singapore's debt also is in the hundreds. However, what we need to do, let's agree that what remains ahead is that our revenue generation measures must not lead to higher taxes. It's not a must. Number two is that the area of debt, we need to be careful so that Kenya does not enter into the unsustainability zone, and we are managing that.
DP, now
so that Kenya does not enter into the unsustainability zone, and we are managing that.
DP, naomba kidogo, wakati ambapo tunazungumzia masuala ya uchumi, kuna wengi ambao wanahisi kwamba mnasema maneno mengi, maneno makubwa makubwa, lakini la msingi ni kwamba biashara nyingi ziko katika mazingira magumu. Wengi wamefunga biashara zao, wengi wamelalamika kwamba hawawezi kuendeleza biashara zao kutokana na zile sheria ambazo zilizoko na zile sera ambazo zinatolewa na serikali. Labda unaweza kuwaeleza wale wanaokutazama leo hii ambao wameshindwa kuendelea na biashara zao, ni mikakati gani kama serikali mnaweka ili kuhakikisha kwamba hizi biashara zinaweza kuinuka na wanaweza kupata pesa mfukoni?
Asante sana. Ni kweli biashara nyingi zinapitia changamoto nyingi, na ni kweli wananchi wakiwemo wanabiashara wamelalamika na pia wametoa mapendekezo ya sheria ama sera ambazo wangetaka tuziangalie upya. Najua ya kwamba hivi sasa Wizara ya Uwekezaji na masuala ya industry ama viwanda inaongea na KEPSA. KEPSA ni ile Private Sector Alliance ama kikundi cha wanabiashara katika sekta ya binafsi. Wanajadiliana kuhusu mambo mawili, na jana wamekuja hapa kunipatia mahali wamefika katika majadiliano. Ni leseni gani ambazo tunapaswa kuziangalia upya, na vile vile masuala ya ile levies ambazo zinatolewa na mashirika mbalimbali. Kwa hivyo swala hili la ugumu wa wanabiashara wetu ni swala ambalo tunaliangazia, tunajadiliana na wale ambao ni washikadau, na serikali iko tayari kutoa mwelekeo wa sera mpya za kuzingatia uboreshaji wa biashara. Ile jambo ambalo nimesema,
manake watu wanakwenda Krismasi hawana hela mfukoni, watakula nini sikukuu?
Unajua hayo majadiliano sio ya Krismasi, ni ya kurekebisha.
Januari kutakuwa na hela za karo zinazohitajika.
Kwa hiyo mjadala sio wa maneno ya karo, ni wa kurekebisha idara zetu na ili biashara zetu zipanuke. Nataka niwahakikishie kwamba nimesema jana waziri wa viwanda na uwekezaji pamoja na wakilishi wa shirika hilo ambalo ni la wanabiashara wameniambia wako katika mjadala, na Januari nimeambia hao waniletee ile ripoti yao ili tuipitishe ama tuijadilie katika baraza la mawaziri. Kwa hivyo mwakani tutakuwa na mfumo mpya, sera mpya, sheria mpya za kuboresha biashara.
Lakini pia kuna wale ambao wanasema, nikimalizia, kuna wale ambao wanahisi kwamba hizi biashara kuna mazingira magumu kwa sababu wale ambao wanapata mshahara, kwa mfano, zile pesa ambazo wao hutumia kwenda kwa hoteli, kwa mfano, kwenda kununua chakula, zimepungua kutokana na yale makato ya mishahara. Kwa hivyo wengi wanashikilia zile hela kidogo walizobakishwa nazo, ndio maana hizi biashara hazisongi mbele. Unasemaje kuhusiana na hili?
Unajua nimesema kwamba Wizara ya Hazina ya Kitaifa imesema ya kwamba iko na mambo manne ambayo inataka kushughulikia ili kujaribu kusawazisha maneno ya kiuchumi na kuhakikisha wananchi wamepata nafuu ya kiuchumi katika household, yani katika individual level, kwa sababu tumekuwa tukikabiliana na mambo ya kijumla. Sasa tunakabiliana na mambo ya kibinafsi, na kati ya hayo majadiliano kutakuwa na sera mpya za mambo ya ushuru na mambo ya kibiashara. Lakini la muhimu zaidi ni kwamba katika hayo majadiliano ni lazima tujue ya kwamba ile ushuru ambao unakatwa, kwa mfano katika mambo ya bima ya afya, unaweza kuwa unapunguza kidogo mshahara wako kama mtu ambaye ameajiriwa kazi, lakini ile bima ambayo ni ya kila mwananchi itapunguza zile arambe za kimatibabu. Kwa hivyo wewe labda pesa yako imepungua kidogo, lakini hizi arambe 5 ama 10 ulikuwa unaitwa kwa sababu uko na mtu kwa familia yako na shida ya figo, shida ya moyo, hizo arambe zikipungua, there is a net off. Kuna vile hiyo mkato imekunufaisha hata kwa njia zaidi kuliko vile ilikuwa, because
swala la naibu rais, lakini unapozungumzia masuala yote licha ufanisi huu wote, we've seen the President Dr. Ruto say we are proud that our sister country of Tanzania is now leading in our business engagements. The success of Tanzania is the success of East Africa. Businesses have been closing shop and going to neighboring countries. So you're speaking of this, and KEPSA has talked about it, that the government seems not to be listening to those who run businesses, that they're escaping to other countries.
I've just told you we are having a conversation with KEPSA. Why don't you call them after this interview?
We did speak a few weeks ago with Bimal Shah.
Should have told you that they are engaging.
And he did say that, whereas that engagement is happening, it is not... They have
identified 2 areas. Yeah. One is the regulatory. They say there is multiple regulation, or what they are calling over-regulation. The second issue on the table is on taxation. We are a bit careful because the issue of taxation, we would rather have it in the broader tax policy and other fiscal issues that are being discussed and spearheaded by the National Treasury than just to take just that business community and handle their taxation issues without the context of looking at tax as a general issue.
I really need to ask a question on the tax regime, because today there has been an announcement that there is a task force that has been formed to get to the bottom of why businesses are closing down in the Republic of Kenya and relocating to other countries. Your Excellency, doesn't that sound absurd? Why do you need a task force to establish why businesses are closing when all you can blame is the taxation regime?
You need to, because this is something that has happened for the last 20 years. It has not happened this year. Just look at which organizations have left Kenya when. The last 25 years. And that's why the contribution of our manufacturing sector to GDP has dropped from as high as 12% many years ago to 7.5%
on the pending bills.
So it's an accumulated problem, and I think there are no quick fixes. The best way to do it is to just analyze all the factors and bring recommendations that will last us another 40, 30 years.
The financial inadequacies being experienced in the country perhaps are as a result of the pending bills. More than 650 billion for the national government, 150 billion for county governments. But you're not budgeting for it. Do you promise Kenyans that as soon as the pending bills verification committee concludes its work, you're going to settle the pending bills?
We will implement the recommendations of the pending bills verification committee.
Thank you.
DP, tumebakisha dakika kidogo kabla ya kufunga, lakini hii leo kumekuwa na mabadiliko katika baraza la mawaziri, na kuna wengi ambao wanahisi kwamba appointments that have been made seem like a harvest just 10 days after President William Ruto met retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, and all those appointed to the cabinet and board chairs seem to be from Mount Kenya. What is this about?
You know, the cabinet, appointments, dismissal, reassignments, if you look at Article 32, is the prerogative of one person, the president. So I'm sure the changes that the president has made have been made in exercise of that prerogative and to advance our country's national life in the weeks and months to come. I cannot directly associate themselves with the political developments, but also I have no reason to disassociate themselves from any political development, because the president has made it clear that for the country to pull and rally itself to do the heavy lifting, there is need for a broader political consensus. It started with the inclusion of the partnership with some of the ministers who were appointed, who were allies of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. The ministers and parastatal chairs who have been elected, who have been appointed today, many of them worked under President Uhuru Kenyatta. That is in the spirit of broadening political consensus so that we can focus not on political competition and the quest for political survival, but on pulling the heavy agenda that we need to pull to transform Kenya and carry everybody.
But there are those who
many Kenyans feel duped or betrayed by the Kenya Kwanza administration, because during the 2022 election campaign, the hustler narrative was the cornerstone of the Kenya Kwanza administration, a break away from traditional political dynasties to more ordinary Kenyans, right? But the appointments being made recently by President William Ruto are people or individuals from established political families. It looks like the Kenya Kwanza government is running away from the hustler narrative back to the dynasties to save the day. Why is that?
As any of the ministers and parastatal chairs who have been appointed today coming from established political families.
They do come largely from the Mount Kenya region, especially.
Sorry again? Sorry again?
They do come, many from the Mount Kenya region. Many who've been in government before, and you remember the call, especially during the Gen Z protests, was to drain the swamp, to have something new in the Kenya Kwanza administration.
I don't know what you call something new, because even the ones who have come are new. They were not there, they are new.
Allow me to rephrase her question, because this is what Kenyans feel.